Welcome to Real Estate 360 Live with Ryan Sloper, the trusted name in real estate radio. Now, here's Ryan Sloper.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper. For those of you not familiar with the podcast, I encourage you to go over to the iTunes store, search in the search bar Real Estate 360, download, subscribe, share, post reviews. Also, you can stream the show. If you don't have an iTunes account, you can stream it via the website at realestate360live.com. We will be covering all things real estate as we do each and every week, but we dive deeper than just real estate. It is more on the economy, the macro stuff here, the Federal Reserve, Congress, what things that are taking place, such as this immigration reform that Obama's going to shove down everybody's throats right now, what that means, what can we extrapolate from that? And it's interesting because it's just much of the same, but this does affect, the play on the Federal Reserve and where interest rates are headed in the near future. So we're going to dive deeper into that. We're going to talk about existing home sales. We're going to talk about the Fed minutes and what they said about inflation. We'll talk about, all the economic data that's going to help you make more informed decisions about you and your real estate. Joining me on our panel, as he does each and every week, is Louis Camerosana. He's a former attorney, former school teacher, and a former general manager of a major real estate portal. He's often cited in the media as a real estate industry expert in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fox Business, MSN, and numerous others. How you doing today, Louis?
I'm doing grand, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thanks for asking. So, obviously, we're at the top of the show. I think, the biggest event that we've had was last night with Obama basically coming out and basically giving amnesty to a reported about 4.7 million undocumented immigrants. Now, I want to talk about this on the economic side. Once again, these people most of them have already been here, a lot of them for 5+ years or so. Basically, they weren't able to pass some sort of bipartisan bill, and that's what's created this whole stalemate. And so he's just basically at this point just using his executive action to say, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway, just like he's done numerous other times. Now, with that being said, the play many think on the other side by the Republicans is that they could threaten to shut down the government once again. Now, I feel like that this is a play on Obama and his staff, because if the Republicans take that stance of, okay, let's try to shut down the government, it's going to make the Democrats look good again, because they're going to go back to pointing fingers, say, oh, look what happened. You shut down the government again. It's your fault, not mine, your fault. And then in the background, you got the Federal Reserve, who once again, I read in some article they had said it's they're the parent in this whole situation. They're the ones that are going to have to step in once again, keep interest rates low, do whatever they have to do to not let everything fall off the hinges completely, right? So this automatically means to me, whatever language or Federal Reserve is talking about, that low interest rate environment will continue. This is going to be a struggle for the next year, back and forth, for nothing to be accomplished, just like there's nothing that's accomplished on the budget. How many years have we not had a budget passed at this point? I believe it's been 6 years, Louis. Something like 6 years. There hasn't been a budget.
Yep.
Okay,
just raise the debt ceiling.
Right. So we'll raise the debt ceiling again going into the next election. The Republicans are going to threaten to throw lawsuits at him to potentially shut down the government. They're going to try to stonewall him however they possibly can. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up making the Republicans look much worse than they want to.
That's because, Ryan, they won't do anything or everything they can to stop him. They will talk about doing everything other than the things that will actually stop him, which includes impeaching him, which includes actually shutting down the government and making the case that Obama has already shut down how government works by issuing this executive order. They won't do any of those things. They'll go on Twitter. They'll complain on Facebook. But they're not going to do anything. They're a party of bluffers, and It's like professional wrestling, only worse, because the Republicans and Democrats don't even know how to do a fake fight. It's kind of ridiculous because Obama knows that they're bluffers. Obama knows that they're not going to do anything because they're worried about they might not get reelected. Well, if they had any sense or any backbone, they would basically say this will not stand, and they'll do whatever they can to stop it. But they won't. They'll do whatever they think they can do that won't get them unelected and won't cause too many waves, but then nothing will happen.
Right. And nobody really, truly will stand up for what they believe in.
Absolutely not, because if you stood up for what you believed in, you may get shot down. You may lose the next election, but you may accomplish what you want. Now, when Obama took that tact, he said, look, this is what I want. I may not get reelected, but guess what? I'm not getting reelected anyway. So I'm going to overstep my bounds and dare you to stop me. And everyone is too afraid to stop him.
Yeah,
and that's the problem, because he becomes then not a lame duck. He actually becomes dangerous because he knows he doesn't have to face the music. And if they're not going to remove him or make impeachment moves, they basically told him up front, we're not going to do anything. We're going to complain. We're going to tweet. We're going to go on Facebook, update our status, and we're going to go on Hannity and complain, and we're going to go on Mark Levin and complain. Big deal.
Right. Yeah, and, you've got, it was a video that was released right before Obama had his speech from John Boehner. Came out and basically said the president has said before that he's not a king and he's not an emperor, but he sure is acting like one. You know what, guys? I mean, it's enough is enough with this talk. It's crap, right?
Exactly. If you actually believe that somebody has overstepped their bounds and has become a king, and the United States Constitution doesn't allow a king, then you use your congressional powers to stop it. End of story. Not you do whatever you can to make sure that you don't look that bad in trying to stop it.
Well, you and I talked way back when Obama, the Affordable Care Act was going through, right? He rammed that down their throats, remember? And we basically, they used the government shutdown, and basically the reality of it was is that they kept threatening that they were going to, this is going to get, completely reversed. And then we let time go by, and nothing, everybody kind of forgot about it. It just went into the background. And this immigration thing, it will do the same thing. It will do the same thing. They'll have this on CNN. They'll have this on every major station for the next 6 months talking about this crap. And at the end of the day, it's going to be much of the same. This country is much of the same, right? We know what we're getting, Louis. Week in, week out, month in, year out, we know what we're getting. It's not.
We're getting nothing other than who's willing to take a risk to get what they want, not necessarily for the American people, but for their constituents that'll get them reelected. And that generally is a very small interest group. Because immigration reform is not on the top, if you did a poll, is not on the top of the top 10, 20, 30 concerns of a majority of Americans.
Right.
Obama's doing it for payback because he owes someone a favor, and he's just going to do it. He may also think it's the right thing to do. He may even think that he's doing it within the Constitution. But unless the Congress challenges him, they can't even have the debate as to whether it's constitutional or not, because they'll just have a political discussion and try to get him to back down. But if you actually bring the case against him, then you have the debate, and eventually it goes to the Supreme Court.
Yep. Well,
whether these executive orders in this fashion actually, these half measures about, well, we'll defund the part that you can't, they're not going to do that.
No.
That'll make them even look worse.
Well, not just that. I mean, they've had opportunities to work out a bill together, right? That basically they never had intentions of doing, because they wanted to put the president in a position where he would be forced to do something like this. And now that he's done something like this, and they have the all they need to come after him, full steam ahead, then they back down like freaking lame ducks, right?
Yeah. Oh, but they talk a big game. You see these senators and congressmen, tweeting away as if that means anything. And they're on Facebook updating their status, talking about how this will not stand and we will unite. No, they won't. They'll be on Twitter and Facebook complaining for the next 10 years. I mean, I told, I don't know, it was one senator, I just said, you know what you do? Unfriend Obama on Facebook and block him on Twitter. See, now you don't have to worry about him anymore. And it's unbelievable. That they actually are spending their time trying to tell people they're going to do something. By golly. No, they're not.
Yeah.
They're going to go on talk shows. They're going to go on Fox, but they're not going to do anything.
Well, you're right. The funny thing is that Obama, he's actually the one that is using the old saying, actions speak louder than words, but the Republicans,
absolutely.
Right? Like, he's like, look, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to just tell you. I'm going to do it. Everybody everybody thought there was a chance that he might back down. Hell no, he's not backing down because he knows what he got the last time when he rammed healthcare down our throats. Now, granted, now everybody's coming about this information now, how they, there's all this erroneous information and things that, like, would actually blow people's minds that.
So what? It's already done. They're not going to go back and do anything about that. In history, the people that break the rules and actually do things that they're not supposed to do are the ones that end up getting admired. It's sad but true. You learn about history, who starts wars, who wins wars, who takes bold actions that they shouldn't have taken. But at the time, but in retrospect, if they turn out to be good deals, then people revere the person for having taken the bold action.
Right, they're considered leaders.
And that's what Obama's gambling on.
Right, absolutely. They're considered leaders whether what they're doing is right or wrong, just because they have a backbone enough to make a decision and do something, right? And it would be, it makes no sense because, like you said, all the Republicans have to do is challenge this all the way up and use the next
flat out, and shutting the government down. They basically, Ryan, can say, look, Obama, you've already shut the government down by an unconstitutional action. Therefore, the government is not running in a constitutional fashion, so we have to take a pause and get it back on track and have a determination as to whether what you did is constitutional or not.
Yep.
And then they can have the debate, and everyone can see it, and people would understand why the government is shut down because they declare that Obama shut it down. But they're not going to do that.
Nope. So we all this right heading into the holidays. Like now, this is what's going to be on the air for the next 6 months. Is this crap.
Exactly? And then now you're right, Ryan. You've diverted all the attention from the shenanigans at the Fed, the shenanigans in the central banks with Japan and Abenomics, and ECB money printing, and the Russia. Economy, and Russia. Now it's all about, we have this tyrant in the White House. What are we going to do? He's signing executive orders. And that becomes a sideshow.
Well, we've been talking about this for years now, Louis, is that they are masterful at creating diversions and sideshows, right? Like, this is what they do. Now, nobody has to worry about the economy for the next year because they got to worry about immigration, whether Obama stepped out of bounds. So they can talk about
exactly.
this.
And we'll never know, at least judicially, whether he stepped out of bounds because they won't bring proceedings.
Right. Yep. They won't bring proceedings. So then we have basically, we have a stalemate going on. There's nothing going on in the economy. And now it doesn't matter whether existing home sales come back better than expectations. It doesn't matter if continuing jobless claims go up or down or indifferent because
correct.
The media is not going to concentrate on this anymore. Well, I mean, look, we got Thanksgiving to worry about, we got Christmas to worry about, and we got immigration to worry about. And that's it. So
Ukraine, forget about that. Syria, ISIS, nothing.
Ebola, remember? Don't forget Ebola. It's still in the background there, Louis.
Exactly.
I mean, it's.
They decided not to cover Ebola. We talked about that 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
That doesn't mean the disease has gone away. That doesn't mean the disease was ever as dangerous as it was or has become less dangerous. It just means they're not talking about it, so you're not supposed to think about it.
And people only pay attention to what they talk about.
Correct.
And so,
as we mentioned, even the alternative media, as powerful as it has become, all it does is react to the narrative and the mainstream media stories that are put out there. It doesn't create new news. It just reacts to how the mainstream media reports news.
Well,
that's a valuable function, but it isn't the same as being on the same par as mainstream media.
Well, isn't it interesting that 3 of the major news networks last night didn't run the actual speech? It was only really one. I think it was NBC was really the only one that ran it.
Why do you think they didn't run it?
Yeah, I mean,
because they knew it would be unpopular with the American people. Have them up there saying, "No, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that," and people would be like, "Whoa, we don't like this guy up there saying that kind of stuff."
Absolutely.
They would always give the mainstream media, other than Fox, would always give Obama as much time as he wants to get up there and try to sell something.
Absolutely.
But this one they knew. No, he might come off badly, so we're not going to show him. We'll tell the story the next day in a different, they'll spin the story. I saw one today. Was like, the headline was, is what Obama did constitutional? It's kind of like, we'll just look at this and ask ourselves the question. They don't report. Or if they do report on it being in a negative light, It has to do with the Republicans say it's no good.
Right.
Not that it's an objective analysis. It's only the Republicans don't like it. It's the same with the Grubergate. It's the Republicans are the ones who feel lied to, not everybody else. Just the Republicans have a problem with the statements that the advisor made and the statements that Pelosi and Obama made regarding not knowing the guy and not having anything to do with him, and he was just some minor guy we just heard about when they were out there during the entire campaign selling Obamacare, citing Gruber as some type of genius who had helped craft this plan. And now they're pretending they don't know him.
Yep.
And the media doesn't report on that. The Republicans are complaining about it.
Yeah,
that's just a fact. It's not something Republicans are complaining about. It's a news story. Someone says something, and then they deny it, and it's of importance. That's a news story.
No, but they'd rather report the stuff like Bill Cosby, right? They'd rather
that's an old story, by the way.
I know. That just keeps getting pulled
I heard
back
about that long ago. There was always been accusations about Bill Cosby. Once it gets in the media, then everyone decides, oh, it's my turn to complain about him. Well, they had been complaining about him. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago Bill Cosby was in the news.
It was. But my point is that these stories just keep resurfacing. But the ones that we should be paying attention to, like how they're mysteriously leaving certain parts of people's speeches out of, like Greenspan when he was talking, right? Like they just basically cut a whole segment out of that article. What the most important thing that he said was, and this is more to the point, and this is what I always tell for our listeners is that it's important to never take anything for face value, especially when dealing with Federal Reserve, Congress, and the president. Okay, because you're never ever getting the true story, ever. I want to emphasize that because people make voting decisions based upon what they see, not what they investigate, not what they research.
Correct.
And I think one of the biggest things, especially with this economy, is nobody challenges anybody. Nobody says, why the hell is that the case?
Or they don't even know about it because it's not reported on. It's even worse.
Correct. I mean, and half of what we talked about on this show, Louis, may sound foreign to people, right? Well, why is that important to me? Why do I care about this stuff?
Brian, I'll give you one. Here's one today that surely won't get reported. The Dutch National Bank announced that they had completed a repatriation of 122.5 tons of gold from the New York Federal Reserve. That's a big deal. Why do they want their gold back? Well, they don't trust it being over with the Fed. They also feel if there's a crisis in Europe, now why would there be a crisis? They are covered because they have most of their gold back. That's not going to be a mainstream media story. With the Swiss referendum that's coming up, where they want to repatriate their gold and then go out and force the Swiss National Bank to buy more. If that's covered, it's covered only because they want to talk about how wacky the Swiss are for doing it, how it's some weird right-wing initiative, how it would be damaging. So what does the media do? They don't cover the story. They go to and they permit the Swiss National Bank to give interviews talking about why they don't like it. Well, that's campaigning right there, because if the news story is how the Swiss National Bank thinks that the Save Our Swiss Gold initiative, which would require them to buy gold and stop money printing to buy euros, would be a disaster, well, that's what people see.
Yeah.
And that's the campaign. So they create the news, so they cover things that they want to cover, and they totally ignore things they don't.
Well, I was watching, I don't remember when it was, yesterday, the president of the Council of Economic Advisors was on CNBC. Okay? Now, he basically came on. I can't even remember what the guy's name was, but he said, in regards to the Affordable Care Act, came on with a straight face and basically said that the Affordable Care Act has lowered health care premiums more than any time in the last 50 years. Now, how could somebody straight-faced come on? You're now insuring 16 million more people. How in the world can healthcare costs go down? Right? I mean, and people would watch this and say, but not the people that are actually paying for health care, right? Because we know, and everybody else knows now, other than the people that are in these huge group plans, typically those are the ones that aren't changing by as much as these people that have individual plans.
Individual plans are all up between 60 and 120%.
Correct, because you're not spreading the risk out amongst all the members, and therefore you have higher costs.
No, you're paying for the uninsured. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're paying for the uninsured, and
it would have been cheaper, and you're paying for those with pre-existing conditions, but it would have been cheaper just to put a tax on people. Because you're paying more in extra premiums than you would be in taxes if they just decided to tax everybody. I wouldn't be in favor of that either, but this is actually a gift to the insurance companies because, as Gruber said, they knew that the insurance companies would just pass along the premiums. So the insurance companies don't lose money. They just have now a captive audience who must buy insurance at a higher price.
Well,
so that smacks of a deal with the insurance companies. Okay, you go ahead and cover pre-existing conditions, and the insurance companies complain. Well, that's going to bankrupt. Say, no, it's not. You're just going to charge more to everybody else, and we're going to make sure they pay because they have to pay.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So CNBC, the person interviewing this guy, basically let him get away with that comment. Didn't even really give a follow-up question to that. Not even challenging him anything on it. And this is the problem. Imagine, Louis, if we had one of these people on our show and we asked them questions, they're not even going to answer them.
Oh, they're going to hang up on us.
They're going to hang up on us, and I think that's very telling, right? Nobody can really tell you what they truly believe, or you know what I mean, or actually have to explain themselves. They can throw out, any information into the world, and they don't even have to back it up these days. They don't. I mean, the Federal Reserve, the last minutes came out, okay? Here's the condensed version. They're concerned with sub 2% inflation for quite some time. They saw some labor slack that's diminishing. Some wanted to remove the phrase considerable time from the language. Global weakness was a concern, but is limited. Okay? That's the highlights from the last 10 minutes there. Now, what's really different from this one from the last one, they literally just swap things out. They'll be like, inflation we don't have enough of it. Looks like now we have some. Now we don't, right? Labor slack. We do, we don't. We do, we don't. Considerable time. We do, we don't. It's back and forth on every one of these things, and it's just like a ping pong game of just changing language each and every time, which basically means that nothing gets done. It's going to be low interest rates for as long as they can possibly get away with it. It's going to be not passing a budget for as long as they possibly can get away with it. It's not challenging the president for as long as they can get away with it. I mean, this is where we're at, Louis. I mean, it's the law. We're going to be like the lost 100 years coming up soon. You know what I mean?
Not the lost decade, the lost century, right?
Yeah, the century. We're not talking about decades.
But we're living off the fumes of the amazing, productive innovations and advances in society over the last 100 years. We've spent the last 20 or 30 trying to divide up the pie, at least in the United States, rather than trying to maintain that edge.
Absolutely. I talk about it. You and I talk about this all the time, but, while we're always challenging education and things of that nature, I think it's important. So the economy is basically non-existent at this point. I mean, the rich are getting richer, and the middle class is getting pushed to the poor. So people always ask me, well, you're talking about this like the economy's negative. It is. However, there is still opportunities for people. Typically, the opportunities, though, are for entrepreneurs, people that are willing to put themselves out there, that can create value in the marketplace and get paid for doing it. The majority of people won't do that, though. That's not 90% of the general public, right? It's not. Those are the people that don't necessarily have to go to college. Those are the people that go to high school and have innovative ideas and put them out into the world and realize, well, I can get paid doing this.
But, Ryan, do you think that's by nature or by, so to speak, nurture? Because 100 years ago, there were far more people that were self-employed as peddlers or whatever they could do to make a living than worked in companies. You even talk about an unemployment rate in the same way. Doesn't a lot of it have to do with the regulations and the taxes that give you a disincentive if you're otherwise inclined to open up your own business?
I do think that, the regulation, the compliance, the fines, and all that stuff is a deterrent. However, I think it does have to do with what's instilled in you as you're growing up. You know what I mean? Like if you have.
But where do you get that installation? From your parents, or do you get it at school?
You definitely don't get it from school, Lewis. You don't get it from school.
That's right. They uninstill the entrepreneurial spirit in you. They teach you in history the great people are all the U.S. politicians.
They want to
and
bring
you learn about the presidents. You don't learn about Henry Ford. He's not revered like Thomas Edison, Tesla. Those guys, you don't talk about those and have to memorize their birthdays and so on. You learn about politicians and what bill they passed. Like learning how a bill becomes a law is more important than how to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
That tells you right there where their priorities are. In fact, if you ran a course on how to make a profit, you'd be considered some kind of greedy. They'd toss that teacher out of class. But how a bill becomes a law, how a bill tells other people what to do, things that maybe they don't want to do, that's fine.
Right. Well,
everybody's learned how a bill. Well, I'm not saying they've learned it, but they've been taught it. How a bill becomes a law.
There's this.
That's the priority.
I mean, literally, there's the biggest double standard ever that takes place in our country. Right? Is that like you, Lewis, are expected as a citizen to abide by the law and do everything that you're supposed to do.
And grow up and maybe create new laws.
Correct. And then the government on the other side, it's just do whatever you want, right? Do whatever you want.
Maybe pay a fine.
It doesn't matter. You know what? You can go steal from somebody, but as long as that's your first offense, we'll let you come back to work. You know what I mean? You can do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. And that's literally like that. It's almost like a mafia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you look at it, we've got the Federal Reserve, who, if the Federal Reserve wasn't here to backstop all this crap, then we would be in dire straits. But since we do have them basically, borrowing money, giving more money to the rich get richer, and they know that they can take big risks and not be penalized if they're wrong, what do you think is going to take place? But who does that punish? It punishes the guy at the bottom, the small business that's trying to get into a medium-sized business that wants to take and go to a bigger business, right? They can keep that from happening because of access to capital. I mean, it's amazing when you see the amount of like startups and the amount of like all these angel investors that are out there, these hedge funds that are set up. Where's all this money coming from, Lewis? Right? Where is all of this money coming from? Like, they're willing to take these risks on companies that haven't produced a dime. Now, granted, there's how many public companies now that aren't turning a profit? We touch on that all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Zillow and Trulia and Overstock, they're running negative $300 million a year. Everybody thinks
going on their second decade of doing no profit.
Right, they're doing no profit, but yet somehow their stock price continues to surge higher. It's counterintuitive, but that's where we're at as a country. It's no longer you have to produce and show results and then get rewarded. You get rewarded for having a great concept and just that you can get 1 million users to your platform, and you don't even have to show how you're going to monetize it just yet. We'll worry about that 20 years from now.
You don't have to do it in the first 10, because if you did, Trulia and Zillow wouldn't be worth billions of dollars because they've never made a sustained profit.
Right. But
the only profit they make is when they strip out all their costs and they say, well, if we didn't have to pay our employees, if we didn't grant stock options, and if we didn't have these expenses, then we're cash flow positive. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I'd be a millionaire if I wasn't.
Well, it's interesting because we've got, I don't know if you saw, Tony Robbins came out with a new book, Lewis, called Money, Master the Game. And what he did was he basically went out and he interviewed the probably top 50 billionaires, right? Billionaires, not millionaires. Because there's a big difference between millionaires and billionaires, right? Like that.
A billion is 1,000 million, so
you're
right.
A lot of money. Right. Yeah. I mean, and they actually talk about, like in time, a difference between like a million and a billion was like 32 years in like seconds. You know what I mean? So they're so far apart, but he went and met with them and asked them and basically broke down everything about money, distilled everything and all these myths that are out there. And I'm sure Wall Street's not liking this book at all because he goes in and basically talks about why you shouldn't have your money in mutual funds because of the excessive fees that are charged. And right, like he talks about the average mutual fund, just a standard S&P index outperforms 95% of all mutual funds. And
you know why that is, Ryan? They buy because their buddies, the fund managers, are buddies with all the companies. They'll buy every company in an industry. So they won't just pick the good ones. They'll buy them all. Right. They may buy them in different proportions, but they get their back slapped if they buy them all.
Yeah, but and so I'm reading this book, right, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, great. So he's distilling these kind of complex subjects around money and make them easier for the average person to understand, right? But here's what's interesting. So he's laying out the blueprint. He basically got Ray Dalio, who's one of the largest hedge funds. He's not even accepting any more clients. I think you had to have. I think he's got $150 billion in his fund at this point. Basically, he has a formula that they've tracked back 100 years that basically performed at almost like 9% or more every single year. I think about 85% of the time. There was 2 bad years. One was negative 3.5, and that's when it was in 2008 when the market went backwards 50%. His was only like negative 3.5 to 3.9, and another time it was like negative 0.9. He basically got him to give the formula for the way that he diversified and created an asset allocation. Now, so we've got all this knowledge. He's spilling, all these billionaires are willing to spill the beans. Basically, essentially, the reason why they're willing to do this is because Tony is not making a dime off his book. He's feeding 55 million people with the proceeds of this book. So they got in on it, and we're like, well, that's great. If you're not taking any more clients, why would you not just tell me the way that you get these profits so that we can help the average American? But I'm like, you know what? It's still in a book format. That means somebody still has to actually go buy the book and read it, right?
Right.
And so herein lies the problem. There's so much information out there, Lewis. Like, you could wake up tomorrow and say that I want to be XYZ, right? You could go onto Amazon. You could buy 10 books from the top people in that industry. You could learn how to do that and how to sell or create a service or product, whatever it is, tomorrow. You could do that. But that still requires the work. You have to do the work in order to get there. And what's happened to me as a society is that we've just become lazy, and that starts at the top, right? That's what the United States, the president, Congress, it trickles down. They want to talk about trickle-down economics, laziness, entitlement. This is created at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way to turn this thing around unless we completely brainwashed people and kids to get them to think differently, and that it is their job to question and to research and to actually put in the work to get where they want to be. Who's going to come out and say that? Nobody.
No, it's against their vested interest to do that. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, the key is for the dismantling of a lot of the structures, giving the Congress, the president, less power, taking it away from the federal level, defunding the schools that don't work. School is a form of welfare. You pay taxes and you send your kids there to daycare. In some cases, they learn something. In some cases, they don't. But if parents took a greater responsibility because the school was no good, it didn't exist, they'd have to teach their own kids. Kids would have to teach themselves. Basically, they've created these structures that, it's like the Pink Floyd Wall movie where they just push you through the system. They teach you, and then you're supposed to go through 12 years, go borrow money, go to 4 more, borrow more money, buy a house, get a job. That's the grind that they've set up, and there's some advantages to that, and it gives some predictability to society, but it also creates a general mediocrity. And as you say, if the system doesn't work and it doesn't produce the jobs and doesn't produce the intellect and it doesn't produce the work spirit, then they got to go on and get relief because the system has failed them. And then the system is more than happy to provide them with that relief because they can get votes from that. So you create a system that's actually destined to kind of decay over time because you can't keep the vibrancy in that system unless you have people doing different things and taking different risks. But when you encourage everybody to go to school, sit in a class for 12 years, borrow money, go 4 more, come out and get a job, it doesn't work that way. And they're seeing that it doesn't work. But what they're trying to do is say, like Liz Warren, we've got to make it so that everybody can go. Mom, everybody's got to go to college. They're not realizing that paying a lot of money to go to a school and sit in a classroom is probably not the best use of anyone's time, especially, as you mentioned, Ryan, there's so many other ways to learn for free.
Yeah, honestly, Lewis, I could, at this point in time, as I just mentioned, and I get a lot of flack from a lot of my teacher friends when I say that I would not go to college again if I could do it all over again. Now, the only way that I would is if it was still for the sports. But if you took the sports part out of it, right?
Like you could just have sports clubs, though. You don't need a college.
Correct. I wouldn't need the college. I mean, I like the experience of hanging out and having a collective team, right? Like that I'm still very close with to this day. But the academic part of it, though, no. I can go on. I know what I'm interested in. I can go on Amazon and $100 buy 10 to 15 books and study my tail off and learn everything that I want to know. I can then reach out to people that are in that industry, become a potential intern or somebody that's getting paid nothing in the beginning just to learn what I want to do, right? You can get all of this just by putting in the work. But realistically, that's not what these colleges and universities want. They want you to stay there for 4 to 6 to 8 years. You're going to learn so much over that period of time, which is a load of crap, by the way. And you brought up the whole nature versus nurture thing. Yes, I think it's absolutely nurture from your parents, from who your parents associated with, who are their friends, right? Because this is what the kids are taking in all the time, And if my son sees me reading all the time before I go to bed, if he sees me working up here in the morning and asks me what I'm doing and I'm telling him I'm working and I tell him specifically, he's probably going to be a little bit more interested than another kid that's parents not doing that, right?
Well, of course.
And we're not rewarding teachers that do go above and beyond the call of duty and that aren't just teaching their kids the stuff that's going to get them to pass a test, right? Like, there are teachers out there that are innovative, right, that really do care about these kids and care
But it
about
doesn't pay
them.
to be innovative.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And this is the problem. So it's like, why are more and more kids being homeschooled? Because there are a lot of parents that understand that if their kids are going to have a shot in this world, that they can't go the normal route. Right? They can't go the normal route.
No, the only way you do well now in school is if you excel and you go to the top 2 or 3 schools in the country, Harvard, Yale, and even there,
it doesn't guarantee you anything.
It doesn't, and the education in Harvard and Yale is no better. The only difference between Harvard, Yale, and Princeton amongst those three versus the other is generally their parents have well-connected jobs and their kids are kind of born into it. And then what they do is they let in like 20% of people who don't come from that wealth or background, and then they end up getting good, the elite jobs at the banks and the law firms and so on. But other than that, there's no advantage you don't learn more at Harvard than anywhere else.
Right.
You get the same. In fact, I know that the Yale Law School has pass-fail. They figure, well, you went to Yale. So, what difference does it make? Go enjoy yourself. You're going to get a great job when you leave. So, it's pass-fail. Well, that doesn't instill any type of competitive spirit or interest in learning and excelling in your academics.
Well,
they figure, you already excelled. We got you into Yale.
Right.
So what do you think that person does? They have an entitlement mentality when they're at their job. They're the boss because they went to Yale. Not because they're going to innovate when they're at the job. It's because I went to Yale. I went to Harvard.
Yeah. I actually get bitter when I look back in my college years because I'm like, man, I was like, you know what? I wasted like 4 years. I could have been like, right now in my business, I could have been like light years ahead. 4 years is a long time, right?
Of course it is.
Especially
the younger you are, it's a greater percentage of your whole life.
Absolutely. And the technology that's there and me sitting through history in this old building that smelled so bad and I'd fall asleep half the time in there with whatever he was talking about, right?
Where did you go to school, Ryan?
Randolph-Macon College, which was a private Division III liberal arts college, right? So They made us take like religion and philosophy and I remember taking classes like Literatures of the Holocaust and all these different things. Now, while there's certain subjects that I was interested in, I could read a book about that and find out all I wanted to know.
Exactly.
Right? We would spend entire semesters on it. Okay? Now, that's not, some would say that's not overkill, but I think it was, and so by the third class, I'm done with it. I don't want anything to do with it. And this is the common theme. Now, was there a great education? I did. I mean, my economics professor just got elected, right? He was a guy that knew economics very well, but I could catch myself in the middle of his class not agreeing with a lot of what he was saying. And, this is pretty typical. Teachers tend to teach and push their agenda on you without even them knowing it a lot of the time, right?
No, it's institutionalized.
Yeah, it is. And, I was always just like, I kind of knew from the time that I got into college that I wanted to be in business for myself. Now, that's probably a byproduct of my dad having been self-employed for himself for pretty much his whole life, right? And I kind of knew that was the path that I wanted to take. I had only worked 2 or 3 jobs when I was 16, 17, 18 years old where I actually got paid a W-2 wage, and I was like, this is not for me. I cannot work for somebody else, right? I knew that immediately. That 4-year education wasn't going to change that one way or the other. So I'm like thinking, I'm 33 now. I would be, right now, if I could have 4 years back, who knows how far more ahead I would be right now if I didn't go to college. And
you'd be 29, I think. Take years off your life when going to college.
Yeah, well, everybody's like, well, oh, you learn so much there. But, the reality is that's just what everybody's taught to say, right? You got a great education. But I've learned more since I've been out of college in 1 year than I learned in 4 years there.
Oh, of course.
And not to go on a rant about this or anything, but I think that if we want to change things, obviously the government's not changing anything. The Federal Reserve's not changing. We've already accomplished that they're not doing anything. So this has to happen within the middle class, within the lower classes. But how does that happen? The information is accessible, but nobody wants to really get it. So how can we really change? That's why I'm saying it could be the lost century, because I don't see how we can have anything change, because the main principles that need to change over time are not.
Well, when you look to government or you look to the school system or the library to effectuate the change, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Right.
Because they're not the proper conduits. They're the problem, as Ronald Reagan would say, to the problems. Looking to the government to fix stuff that is ruined is the worst possible path you can take. Same with the school system. We need more courses in this. No, you don't. That's not what it's all about. You really need people to take their own initiatives. People need to solve their own problems. And when they start to do that, instead of trying to throw it off on a government program or changing the school curriculum, then you run into trouble, because you're now taking a passive view on what needs to happen. Somebody needs to fix something. Yeah, and that's
right.
When you get a dictator. That someone will come in. And remember, one person doesn't have all the answers. Even if they are really intelligent and for whatever reason they're not obsessed with power, they're benevolent, they still don't know what they're doing. Right. The genius of the people is millions and millions of people interacting, doing different things, trying different things, seeing what works best. It's far better than one central planner, one dictator, or one group of central planners. That's what's gotten us into trouble. But people don't want to solve problems. They want to give them to somebody else to solve, and that's why you have politicians. And they're the worst suited to solve anyone's problems, because they've never solved their own. When you have Gruber telling us what health care is, he probably never had a job. He's just decided that he understands this. He can talk about it. He can market himself and get people to pay him millions of dollars in consulting fees. Maybe he's never even been sick. I mean, then how do you understand health care and the
right.
costs of it? I mean, I'm not trying to belittle what he thinks he might have accomplished, but what value does he really have other than advising government?
Yeah. Well,
he's not producing anything. In fact,
right.
what the end result of what they produced is counterproductive. It's the worst thing you can possibly have. It's a system
right.
where everybody pays more and gets less.
Well, it
takes a brain to figure out how to create a system where everyone is unhappy.
Yeah. Yep. Well,
where the consumer is the loser. Well, the government's the winner.
Right. Well, you and I are talking about real estate, right? And it's like, we've got backgrounds in it, and we've worked for companies that were involved in real estate. It's like if we didn't have that background, but yet we're trying to talk openly about real estate when we've really never been even involved in it, then okay, well, why should anybody listen to us, right?
Right.
But
like Obama, he's talking about how to create jobs. Well, you have to have had one to even understand what a job is. Right.
Show me your history of creating jobs or understanding what that even is.
And you would know that governments don't create jobs. When you have Hillary Clinton saying, "Don't let anybody tell you that corporations create jobs," that just shows how ignorant she is.
Yep.
She acts because she's been in government her whole life. She thinks government runs everything, including the private sector, including making jobs.
Well, we have, speaking of jobs, the initial weekly jobless claims came in at 291,000 versus an estimated 285,000. But they spent it because it's like the lowest claims in how many years? I don't even know, 14 or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so now there's these headlines that continue to come out. October existing home sales, 5.26 million versus 5.16 million. You want me to explain to you why you might have a slight uptick in existing home sales? I'll explain it to you, because we had a dip in interest rates. Anytime there's a dip, you will get a subtle spike in the amount of transactions that take place. That's just the way it works, right?
Most home sales in 6 years. Yeah, 6 years ago they didn't sell that many homes either.
No, and
it's seasonally adjusted, and it can get changed, and it wasn't up that much. But now they're talking housing recovery again.
Well, and you know what the interesting thing is because, yes, I'm in real estate, so I can tell everybody it's a great opportunity to buy if you're able to get a loan, a low fixed rate, protect yourself from future inflation. It is a home. It's not an investment. Remember that. Okay?
An asset.
It's a home. It's an asset that, yes, it's a forced savings account because you will get some equity, but will the equity today be the same as equity from 20, 30 years from now? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And anybody that tries to tell you otherwise, like these talking heads that will say, we're going to have a 3% price appreciation over the next 5 years.
Yeah, their models show that.
Their models show that, but they don't ever take into consideration if they have 1 year that's negative 25 or 50%. Okay? And
right, long-term capital management had models too, and they went bankrupt. They had to go crying to the Fed to get bailed out.
Well, I've been talking with a lot of agents lately, Louis. A couple that are in my mastermind group that I'm a part of, and we just kind of talk about what's going on to kind of get a sense throughout the country. And my market in D.C. metro area is one of the last ones I think to feel this slowdown. But everywhere else, they're saying the same thing. They're saying it's kind of scary slow.
Right.
Okay. Now,
that's obvious, and they're trying to say because the job market is picking up and the interest rates are that home sales are increasing. The job market isn't picking up, and home sales aren't increasing.
Do you know what's picking up is the amount of people that are on unemployment benefits and then falling off of unemployment benefits because they've been on it for so long. The amount of part-time jobs might be picking up, but that means that full-time jobs, there's none of them there.
Yeah, but the part-time job growth, as we've seen, Ryan, if you look at the data, the BLS is there for anybody to look at. All the job growth is at 55 plus. That is not a healthy market. The job growth is there because those people can't retire or have come out of retire to take part-time jobs. That's your job growth, and those people are not looking to buy houses.
Well, and Louis, that's scary, knowing that's such a large percentage of people in that.
And it's not reported on. They just report that jobs have been increased. They don't talk about who's getting them and what type of jobs they are. That's the real story. When you know that all of the job growth, that the people in their prime working years, 28 to 55, are losing full-time jobs and are not even keeping pace with the part-time jobs.
Yep. We don't have any sort of, wage growth. That's non-existent. We really don't have any, and I need to clarify this for people, full-time employees being added, full-time, okay? Because guess what? Corporations don't want full-time employees anymore. They want contracted employees. They want part-time employees. They want to do whatever is going to help their bottom line. So you would think on the other side that somebody would get smart and say, oh, well, they're skirting around the rules. How can we make this so we can get the job situation figured out? They'll never figure it out. They'll never figure it out. It's right in front of them. It's right in front of them, Louis, right? I mean,
yep.
At the time, it's right in front of them, but they choose not to do anything. Much of the same as we started the show, the Republicans had it right there in front of them, right for the taking, to challenge him, to challenge Obama, but they won't. They won't. They're soft. They're soft. And why would we want to hire a Republican as a president if they're going to be soft? Right?
Well, it's a fine line. You want somebody who plays within the confines and works within the confines and gets things done. But if the confines and if the constitutional government does not provide a result that you want, well, that means that's what the people want. They don't want you to do anything because you're at a stalemate. And the problem with immigration, for example, is no one has come up with a solution that's palatable to a majority. That doesn't mean, well, okay, we haven't come up to, no one was able to prevail, so guess what? I prevail because I'm president, so I'm going to do something.
Right.
Well, that's like, when you have your family meeting, you have all the kids there, everybody votes, and the dad says, okay, well, I'm glad you all think that way, but we're going to Florida for vacation. It's not California.
I'm the dictator here.
Exactly. Once it's like you pretend to give everybody a say, but that's not how the government is supposed to be set up. It's not supposed to be, well, we'll just have the Congress pretend that they have some kind of power, but if they don't agree with me, then I'll just do what I want.
Well, it's interesting because we have basically a manipulated political system. We have a manipulated monetary policies. We have artificial manipulation in the stock market, manipulation with the Federal Reserve, everywhere, right? Like this market is so just. I mean, I can't even use the word. It's a cluster. You know what, right? Like it's a disaster. Like
it's centrally planned, and they're trying to get a result that they want that suits their needs, and also what they think will suit everyone else's needs. They're trying to play almost godlike in the sense that they're going to suit their needs and their buddies' needs, and at the same time they're doing society a favor, doing God's work by centrally planning all these markets.
But and it's interesting because, if you ever want to get a better look at what's going on with our country, go over and read some of, like, the European blogs on the way they report on us, right? And you'll find out why they're trying to start hoarding gold now and why there's many countries that really feel that we are on the way out, right? Because they can see long-term that what we're doing is disastrous. Now, many of these other economies and countries are in bad shape themselves. So it makes it look like we're not as bad off as they are. But at the end of the day, we're definitely not better than them. We're definitely not better than them. We just have a printing press. If they had a printing press, they'd be okay too.
And they're trying to get one. They have press envy.
Well, I would have press envy too. They're sitting over here looking. Well, their jobs are terrible. All this, the economy's really stagnant, not moving anywhere. But yet the stock market's up. Why is that happening? We want that too. We want
that too. Exactly. Well, look at Abenomics. I mean, they just came out. I think it was last night. And basically said, we didn't expect the yen to fall so much. No, you just print and buy every bond that the Japanese Bank of Japan issues, and you increase your stimulus, which would be the equivalent of doing $4 trillion a year in the United States. What do you expect?
Yep.
Well, I guess it's because the United States got away with it, and our dollar didn't take that big of a beating when they did QE. But you got to remember, Japan's a smaller country, and probably the Bank of Japan doesn't have the same manipulations and it doesn't have the world reserve currency either as an advantage.
Right.
So they start printing, there's going to be a disaster, and there has been. Well, the only reason the U.S. got away with QE was because of the world reserve currency status, and that most countries keep dollars in reserve for international trade and just to have on their balance sheets.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're headed into the holiday season now, and so I know the automatic question is, well, is there any implications of the president doing this and the potential backlash from the Republicans? I think Will stated it pretty clearly that they're not going to do a daggone thing, right? So
no, they're going to complain on Twitter, Facebook, Fox,
and they can threaten, right? They can threaten to do all these things. So what could potentially happen with the stock market is there could be a slight pullback in the stock market if there is the threat of them. They're not actually going to probably follow through on those threats, right? But the fact that they might put a damper on the stock market, which might mean that we might get another dip back in mortgage interest rates. Just something to pay attention to. For those of you that are out there that might be in a position to buy now and are trying to time, when the best interest rate might be available, I would say right about now. Because when we start having this uncertainty, typically there's a flight to safety, which is bonds, mortgage-backed securities. The Federal Reserve will continue to buy mortgage-backed securities and treasuries for the next 100 years, so don't worry about that. If you're able to take advantage of low interest rates, I would do so. Now you're actually going to get a better deal going into the holiday season because there's less inventory coming on the market through Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? And even through the new year. If you're able to couple that with a low interest rate environment, you can get a good deal right now. So with all this negativity that seems to be out there, and unfortunately I don't like to be negative. I'm not in my own personal life. I just have to state the facts, right? As you say, Lou, we have to state the facts, what's in front of us. But there are a lot of positive opportunities out there. Now, maybe not everybody can capitalize on it, but for the few that can, please see professionals, get yourself in a position to potentially be able to take advantage of it. Even if it's not this year. I do want to, close the show up. I am starting to see that a lot, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're starting to see that, FHA is gaining too much market share. I have a feeling they're going to start to relax these underwriting guidelines even more than they already have, which is something I talked to you about, Louis, a while ago, right?
Mm-hmm. We covered it in a whole show.
Right. At some point, they don't have a choice but to start to make these underwriting guidelines a little bit more lax, which might mean instead of 2 years consistent employment history, it might only be 1 year. So what do? Then they start lending to people that might not necessarily be the best candidate, but they got to push. They got to push because otherwise these numbers will continue to get worse.
Right. The solution, though, is not to lower standards and bring the fences in. The solution is to get people more jobs and more money through wage growth. Not, well, they don't have that and we have a housing problem. So, well, they couldn't really afford a home and they really shouldn't qualify. But you know what? We need to drive housing, so here's your loan.
I agree with you 100%, Lewis.
But that's what they're going to do.
Exactly. That's what they're going to do, and so it's kind of our job still to put it out there to allow people to capitalize on it if they can. Right? They're working the system. They're working the system. Why shouldn't you? If you can capitalize on a sub 4% interest rate, you only have to have a job for 1 year to do it.
Then do it, exactly.
You know what I mean? If I can help you find 100% financing with a lender that's willing to give that, you don't have to put any money out of pocket. The seller will pay your closing costs. Then you better do it.
Assuming that you have confidence that you can keep your job and then you can make the payment, sure.
You know what? There's people out there now, Lewis, they're saying, I don't even care if I do lose my job. I'll go back to Obama and I'll ask him to figure it out for me. Right? He's the king. He can figure that out. I mean, this is the way we're set up, though, here. It's that you take advantage of a great interest rate. If you can't pay it a year from now, don't worry about it because we'll create another 4-letter acronym of another program that will help you out.
Yes, you need those 4 letters. So, Ryan, before we close in, what's your prediction on the Republican response to Obama's executive order on immigration?
I feel much the same you do. I feel like they're going to threaten all the way down the line that they're going to, put a lawsuit on him, try to impeach him, threaten to shut down the government. But it's just going to be, just speak. It's not actually going to amount to anything. What will happen, and this could probably ride out for 60, 90, who knows how many days at this point.
Until they lose interest in it.
Until they lose interest, right. Until the media starts to find the next sideshow. And once they find the next sideshow, this will make its way into the background, just like Obama. Or
until he does another executive order, making himself, you know what? That 2-term thing, that's ridiculous. There should be
why shouldn't I run a third time, right? Like, I'm king.
Exactly. Just issue an executive order. In fact, issue an executive order and saying, we don't even need an election.
Yeah.
2016, I declare myself president for, maybe not life, but at least to 2020. Okay.
Well, but anyone
got a problem with that?
Yes. This is a very scary situation for the Republicans, right? Because if they don't act on this, which they probably are not going to, like I said, 90% chance they don't do anything.
Republicans don't expect them to do anything.
Well, yeah, but by not doing anything, it just furthers, it goes to show that there's just not this backbone there. They don't have a backbone. So they get into the next election.
It means the government doesn't work, Ryan.
Correct. But it's because you know what? The political system is just set up to be just completely a mess, right? It's just to basically, a lot of the Republicans and Democrats are friends anyway. Like, they go back and forth. But there's interest on both sides of the aisle, right? They can
professional wrestling is what it is.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, at this point,
without anything that's fun to watch, though.
Yeah, but I do think that there probably won't be anything to happen. The next sideshow will be created after the first of the year. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet. We'll continue to get economic reports that will show that everything seems to be getting better through the holidays because I'm sure retail sales and all this other crap will go up.
They won't say that. Yeah, exactly. They'll say they went up.
Yeah, they'll say they went up when they're actually going down or getting worse.
There won't be the most disappointing this or the unexpected that. Or if they're so bad, they will blame the snowstorm in mid-November in Buffalo for the nationwide decline in sales.
That's it. 6 feet of snow. It'll bury any business, right? Like that's what will happen. I mean, we find very interesting ways to spin stuff, and the reality is I don't really think there's any way of getting around spinning what the Republicans are going to do here. I think it's just going to be much of the same, Lewis. We use that term much of the same because that's what we've had for how many years, right? We know what we're going to get. Now, you know what? I hope that they prove me otherwise, but I'd say there's a 10% chance of that happening.
And the problem is, Ryan, this has nothing to do with immigration. This just has to do with whether it could be on any issue. The issue isn't whether you're in favor of his plan or not.
It's
the principle. This is not even politics. This is, you're supposed to learn how a bill becomes a law. Well, how does the Constitution operate? This is a classic example. If anyone has any interest in how government works is, can the president do this? And the only way you find out is to challenge him. not to try to get him to change. Not to, you have to challenge him. It's got nothing to do with whether you're for or against what the substance of what he's doing.
Yes, and the track record of them challenging, and obviously Obama doing this, it's zero. He knows.
The only way you can challenge him is you have to impeach him, or you have to shut the government down, and you have to battle.
And the only thing they're worried about is they know that there's another presidential election coming up, and people are telling them that, hey, if you shut this government down, they're going to blame it on you.
So all they're thinking is, okay, so they gain the presidency, and they win in 2016, and they have the Congress and the Senate and a president that are all Republican. So what? What are they going to do next?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Have they won any mandate to do anything? Because their mandate, the way they got there, is by waiting it out.
Absolutely.
So what? By allowing the other side to screw up more. So now it's their turn to screw up.
It is their turn to screw up, and when we reconvene next week, Lewis, I guess we'll find out, what takes place over that period of time in the next week.
Right. What the leadership of the GOP does.
Yeah, it'll definitely give us something to chat about, I'm sure, next week. But the one thing that you can pay attention to is watch the volatility of the stock market over the next week, because there will be a lot of threats that are pushed out there in the media.
And watch gold and silver.
And watch gold and silver, because these things kind of will show where things are headed a little bit. Typically, the markets don't catch fire heading into the holidays. People start to take money off the table heading into the new year. So there's not going to be too much to extrapolate, but I think that for those able to capitalize on low mortgage interest rates, they should do so if they can. Right. We'll leave it there, Lewis. If you don't mind giving your blog out so people can check out your blog this week, any new blog posts that you may have.
Thanks, Ryan. Smaulgld.com, SMAULGLD. Covered a lot of topics this week, the gold repatriation, gold supply and demand, gold repatriation by the Dutch government, gold supply and demand analysis, silver supply and demand analysis, and a whole bunch of new stories coming up. So please check it out. Thanks,
Lewis.
Thanks, Ryan.
Appreciate it, guys. Be sure to download, subscribe, share on iTunes. Search Real Estate 360, and also you can stream it on the website at realestate360live.com. Until next time, guys, take care.